Patience has run out, and the worst nightmare of the fans of the New York Knicks has come true.
I can't think of a worse day in history for the New York Knicks franchise than today.
Molly, I thought they were supposed to get KD and Kyrie, the Knicks.
Sell the team!
Do you think I should sell the team? You know what? Enjoy watching them on TV.
Last time the New York Knicks won a championship, I was 5 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 51.
Did you see those New York Knicks last night? Did you see them? Did you see them?
Let's go Knicks! Let's go Knicks!
This New York Knicks team is a legit title contender this season. And if anybody else say anything different, then they haven't been watching the Knicks play.
If you're a young basketball fan under the age of 25, then it's safe to say that for the overwhelming majority of your life, the New York Knicks have been the laughingstock of the NBA. Whether it's their controversy-filled 2000s, their failures with Carmelo Anthony in the 2010s, or their free agent disaster in 2019, one feeling that has always been associated with the Knicks is embarrassment. However, after holding the title of the worst record in the 21st century for nearly 21 years, finally, the Knicks have built a contender. They've had an incredibly successful 2023-24 campaign, reaching their highest winning percentage in years. You'd think since they're located in the media epicenter of America, they'd be getting more attention for this. But interestingly, their rise has been relatively undocumented and unacknowledged by the NBA media. In the wise words of the King of New York, Trae Young, the apology must be as loud as the disrespect was. And no team over the last few decades has been criticized as fervently as the Knicks have. Today, we'll be investigating the overlooked rebuild and explaining how the New York Knicks went from the joke of the league to a respected contender. The year that marked the turning point for the Knicks franchise was 2019. Before then, their organization was in shambles. Their draft history was disgustingly bad. Their free agent signings usually aged poorly into bad contracts, and more often than not, they were fleeced in the trade market. These problems were highlighted the most in the Carmelo Anthony and Phil Jackson era that stretched from 2011 to 2017. During this time, the Knicks had high expectations, but never lived up to the hype, often leaving their fans unsatisfied and exhausted. Change was needed, and once both Melo and Jackson were gone, a new era was underway in NYC. Entering the 2018-19 season, the Knicks were left in a desolate state, winning just 17 games, the fewest in their franchise's history. The whole team was run by idiots. The ownership and James Dolan embarrassed the organization on a regular basis, kicking out spectators who yelled for his firing. David Fizdale, the team's coach, lost the locker room within a few months of being hired. The roster from top to bottom was full of scrubs, most of which were out of the league within a few years. On top of this, their salary cap situation was a complete nightmare. Players like Enes Kanter, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Courtney Lee were making upwards of $18 million a year. The second highest paid player on the squad was Joakim Noah, a guy who wasn't even on the team because he was cut before the 18-19 season even began. To make matters worse, their only shining piece of hope in Kristaps Porzingis was sidelined with a torn ACL he had suffered a year prior in February 2018. The Knicks were stuck in basketball hell, so how did they escape this wretched situation that appeared to have no light at the end of the tunnel? Well, it all started with one franchise-altering trade that changed everything. In February 2019, Kristaps Porzingis reportedly requested a trade, and was immediately shipped to the Dallas Mavericks in a deal that shocked the basketball world. For the crown jewel of the franchise, the Knicks received a handful of solid role players and 2 first-round picks. New Yorkers were blindsided and felt outraged. How could it be that Porzingis requested a trade out of nowhere and was moved so abruptly for a bunch of nobodies? According to the Knicks, Porzingis was hinting towards asking for a trade. So the Knicks, who already wanted to get rid of him since they refused to give him a max contract, happily obliged. They attached multiple other pieces to the deal alongside KP, most of which were overpaid players. The justification behind this deal was that it would free the Knicks up cap space that they could then use to chase big-name free agents in the summer of 2019. The ironic thing about this trade is that at the time, it was unanimously mocked by analysts. Looking at it now though in retrospect, it was the deal that single-handedly turned the Knicks franchise around. Amidst the anger from fans at this trade, optimism was in the air. The summer of 2019 was envisioned by some as the exact moment where the Knicks would go from disrespected to feared by the league. Their hopes? Getting the #1 pick and drafting Zion Williamson, then going out in free agency and adding Kyrie and KD to form a super team. It was possible, and it was being hyped up by everyone, including James Dolan, the owner himself.
And I can tell you from what we've heard, I think we're going to have a very successful offseason when it comes to free agents.
However, once the draft lottery came around and they ended up with just the 3rd pick, their plan was cut in half. Then in free agency, their hearts were torn apart as KD and Kyrie joined forces in Brooklyn, the Knicks' ultimate rival located just a few miles away. It was a disaster, and it was so disheartening that the Knicks front office released a public statement addressing the fanbase's anger, where they frantically tried convincing them that the future was still bright. This was a major wake-up call for the organization, and forced them to change their entire basketball mindset. Now, rather than praying for a lucky event to save them, like being handed the top pick or signing a big-name star, the Knicks instead chose to go chase success themselves, and that's where their rise began. The Knicks pushed onwards after being rejected by KD and Kyrie, using their newfound money to sign solid players like Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, and Marcus Morris. A plethora of power forwards, all signed on relatively short-term deals that allow the Knicks to keep their cap space and trade flexibility. New York wasn't signing these guys because they believed all of them would contribute towards a championship. Rather, they were signing them because they could later move them for more assets. But when the flames died down, the Knicks' 2019-20 campaign was yet another unimpressive product on the court. They won just 21 out of 66 games. Their rookie 3rd overall pick, RJ Barrett, showed flashes, but was overshadowed by the top 2 picks of the draft in Ja Morant and Zion Williamson. In his 5-year Knicks tenure, Barrett proved to be a mediocre player, and was ultimately a letdown. Another player viewed as a disappointment during this time was Julius Randle. The big-name free agent signing of the summer was immediately vilified by the Knicks fanbase for his frustrating playstyle. Randle struggled in his first year with the Knicks, regressing in efficiency and scoring. As a result, many jumped to criticize his contract, fearing it was yet another bad deal handed out by New York. During the 2020 trade deadline, the Knicks were quite active, trading Marcus Morris to the LA Clippers for Mo Harkless and a few picks. This was an example of the Knicks' new strategy, which was to sign solid players on short deals and move them for picks. What's incredible about this trade is that the 2020 Clippers first rounder they got back for Morris actually turned into Immanuel Quickley, a player who would grow into an elite 6-man for the group. Rome wasn't built in a day, and while the 21-win Knicks were still disrespected by most, things were about to change. The team with one of the longest playoff droughts in the league was about to undergo a culture shift, all thanks to a small seed that was planted in February 2020. Outside of the roster moves, players, and trades, the 2019-20 season saw 2 key events take place that changed the future of this franchise. One was the firing of their inept coach, David Fizdale, and the other was the stepping down of the team's president, Steve Mills. Sports agent Leon Rose replaced Mills, and Tom Thibodeau later replaced Fizdale. The Knicks undoubtedly upgraded at both positions here. The Thibs hiring changed the entire franchise for the better. The new coach came with a system that thrived immediately, prioritizing defense, hustle, and unselfishness, all things that the franchise had lacked for years. Adding Thibodeau ushered in a much-desired new era of stability at the coaching position. The case was similar with Leon Rose, who proved to be one of the most successful executives in the team's history within a few years of him getting the job. Instantly, the new executive went to work. In the 2020 draft, the Knicks came away with Obi Toppin and Immanuel Quickley. Toppin had a less than stellar 3-year run in New York, while Quickley proved to be much more valuable. They then signed a few role players, bringing in Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Austin Rivers, and trading for Derrick Rose a few weeks into the season. All these moves would help build what was an unexpected return to relevance in the 2020-21 campaign. In this season, the Knicks surpassed all expectations, winning 41 games and finally making the playoffs at the 4th seed. Who would have thought that adding actual NBA players would make a team win more games? What a great strategy! The reason for the Knicks' unfound success this year can be pointed to a few factors, one of which was Julius Randle taking the leap. Randle went from being called overpaid to being praised. The power forward made his first All-Star game and won the Most Improved Player award. He was the main anchor of the team, and was helped by steady contributors like RJ Barrett, Derrick Rose, Reggie Bullock, and Immanuel Quickley. Looking back at this roster, most of the players wouldn't even remain in the league for that much longer, which makes their sudden rise in this season all the more shocking. Another factor for this team's success was Tom Thibodeau. He immediately proved to be the most competent coach the franchise has had in years, and gave them a hard-nosed identity on both sides of the ball. The new-look Knicks went 16-4 in their last 20 games, which sent their fanbase into a frenzy with hopes that a deep playoff run was possible. But this feel-good story was burnt into flames by Ice Trae and the Atlanta Hawks, who quickly dispatched them in 5 in round 1. The Hawks, despite having an identical record as the Knicks, thoroughly outplayed them. To put it simply, the lights were too bright. Most of New York's starters shriveled up under the pressure and regressed in these playoffs. Most notably, RJ Barrett and Julius Randle failed to show up. Both were incredibly inefficient and recklessly turned the ball over. On the other hand, Trae Young and the Hawks rose to the occasion, and just like that, the Knicks' promising season was over. Seeing the Hawks do the Knicks as badly as they did probably left most Knicks fans never wanting to watch the sport of basketball again. But for those in the fanbase who participated in sports betting, they still had something to keep them occupied for the remainder of the playoffs. This is especially relevant in the current college basketball season that's finally coming to an end in March Madness, which is why the sponsor for today's video is DraftKings. This is the last chance to get in your college basketball bets for the season. To round out the year, DraftKings is offering all new customers $150 in bonus bets instantly when they place their first $5 wager. Using DraftKings Same Game Parlay, you could use your $150 in bonus bets to combine multiple bets together like total points scored, number of rebounds by your favorite player, and more. If you're interested, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, you can still join in with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and have a shot to win cash prizes. That's promo code DylanDoesBasketball, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Please gamble responsibly, and call 1-800-GAMBLER if you have a gambling problem. Now, where were we? While many expected New York to build on their 2020-21 season with a strong summer, the team instead took a step back due to poor decision-making. In the 2021 offseason, the Knicks handed out a plethora of sizable contracts to unworthy players. Evan Fournier was given a huge 4-year $73 million deal. Nerlens Noel was handed $27 million over 3 years. Alec Burks, 3 years $30 M's. Derrick Rose, 3 years $43 million. Kemba Walker, 2 years $18 million. The Knicks gave what amounted to the GDP of a small country to a bunch of scrubs. Sorry, D-Rose fan club. It wasn't all bad though. They did have a nice 2021 draft, picking up Quentin Grimes in the first round, and Jericho Sims with their 58th pick, both of which have shown some promise. But besides this, their offseason was mid, which led to the 2021-22 Knicks regressing to the mean. Their roster proved to be flawed. The Knicks' lack of a point guard absolutely killed them. Julius Randle, the squad's best player, declined immensely. His three-point shooting took a big dip, going from 41 to 30%. Most disappointingly, RJ Barrett didn't take a year 3 leap, and often proved to be more of a liability on the court rather than a winning player. They were a mediocre team stuck in the middle, the worst position one could possibly be in the NBA. They tried to take chances on potentially good players, like when they traded for Cam Reddish in January 2022, but in New York, he just wouldn't work, eventually falling out of the rotation and being permanently benched. Fans were becoming impatient. Some even started debating whether or not it was time to tear the team down and fire Coach Thibodeau. So how did the Knicks save themselves? By a little thing called preparation, with some tampering sprinkled in. The point guard. It's a position that holds the utmost importance in the NBA. The point guard is often the floor general, the first to touch the ball on every possession, the tone setter, and in the Knicks' case, the missing piece. For months heading into the summer of 2022, the Knicks were carefully watching Dallas Mavericks point guard Jalen Brunson. In the 2022 playoffs, Knicks executives sat with Julius Randle in the front row of the Mavs playoff game against the Jazz. A few weeks before free agency, the Knicks hired Rick Brunson, Jalen's father, to be an assistant coach. On top of this, Leon Rose, the general manager of the team, was Brunson's godfather, while Leon's son, Sam, was Brunson's agent. Shameless behavior all around. But the Knicks didn't care. They saw the kid's potential and chased after him like a starving lion chasing after a gazelle. A few hours into free agency, the two parties agreed on a 4-year, $104 million deal, and this turned out to be nothing short of fantastic. These are how championship teams are built, through taking chances and through the relentless pursuit of untapped talent. Brunson was seen as a great player, but few expected him to evolve into the All-NBA beast he ended up becoming in New York. In just a few years, the Knicks went from their highest-paid player being Enes Kanter to Jalen Brunson. What an upgrade. But adding Brunson wasn't the only excellent free agent move. The Knicks also swooped in and signed Isaiah Hartenstein to a 2-year, $16 million contract, which was a steal. Hartenstein, who had long been neglected at his previous destinations, blossomed into an elite rotation center that could easily fill in at the starting spot when other players were hurt. But how did they create this cap space to sign these pieces to begin with? It all came from the eventful 2022 draft, where the Knicks wheeled and dealed. On draft night, they made a bunch of moves, first selecting Ousmane Dieng with the 11th pick, and shipping him to the Thunder for 3 protected first-rounders. New York then flipped a first from that deal and some second-rounders to Charlotte for Jalen Duren, a center at the 13th pick. They weren't done yet. They knew that the Detroit Pistons were enamored with Duren, so they shipped him there along with Kemba Walker for yet another first-rounder. It was all sequence that helped the Knicks gain some picks and get off the overpaid Kemba contract, freeing them up to sign Brunson and Hartenstein. Genius work, but no, they weren't done yet. They had their eyes on an even bigger fish than Brunson, and with their new bolstered draft capital, they were going to try and make a splash. Donovan Mitchell, a star guard for the Utah Jazz, was one of those big names New York had been dreaming of. He was on the trade block and drew interest from dozens of teams, including the Knicks. Ultimately, they were quite aggressive in pursuing him, but the deal fell through in the end due to some complications. For one, according to some in the Knicks front office, Danny Ainge and the Jazz were asking for quite literally everything in a possible trade package. It was reported that Utah's executive, Ainge, refused to trade Mitchell to the Knicks in some sort of an anti-New York agenda. The Knicks tried to add valued young players to their package like Mitchell Robinson, RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and more, but the Jazz said LMAO nah and blocked their number. This frustrated the organization greatly, but in retrospect, it was the right move for them to stay patient and skip on this deal. The Knicks put trust in their own roster they had already constructed, a strategy that would pay off. Fast forward to the 2022-23 season, and the Knicks were playing good old-fashioned 500 ball. Brunson and Randle were contributing well, but the team needed another piece to push them from the play-in to the playoffs. The Knicks front office knew this, so they targeted a player who fit in seamlessly to their ever-developing culture of hustle and toughness. Over in Portland, Josh Hart, a wing on the Blazers who was up for a contract extension, wanted to go somewhere where he would be given a bigger opportunity and an extension. At the trade deadline, the Knicks pounced, moving a package based off Cam Reddish and a first for him. This would be yet another excellent move by the team. They added one of the most valuable role players in the league for pennies on the dollar. Hart embodied the hard-nosed Tom Thibs system, constantly frustrating opposing squads with his elite rebounding ability and relentless hustle. It wasn't a flashy deadline by any means. Many expected the Knicks would chase after star guard Zach LaVine instead. But the Knicks remained patient, proving once again that their commitment to slow building as opposed to star chasing was as disciplined as ever. As a result of acquiring Hart, the team gained some momentum to end the year, going 17-8 in a stretch that included a 9-game winning streak. They closed out winning 47 games total, which wasn't groundbreaking, but it was still their most successful season in a decade. This progress was capped off by an excellent Round 1 series, where the 5th-seeded Knicks knocked off the 4th-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers in 5. Not only was it their first time winning a playoff series since 2013, not only did they comfortably eliminate their opponent who was favored, but they silenced their critics who lampooned them for not trading for Donovan Mitchell. They made the right choice believing in their roster. Jalen Brunson also shook off his critics as well, dominating the series with a 24 points per game average. By this point, any talk about the Knicks overpaying him in the summer of 2022 were put to rest. Other players like Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett impressively showed up, with Robinson shining in the closeout Game 5, where he grabbed 11 offensive rebounds. Round 2, though, saw the Knicks run into a stronger, more disciplined, and better shooting Miami Heat team that eliminated them in 6. The Knicks struggled, especially in the fourth quarter of these games, being outplayed in crunch time in Games 1, 4, and 6. Once again, Jalen Brunson captivated fans with a 30 points per game average. But while some players did well, others on the squad left much to be desired. One of those players who was really starting to get on Knicks fans' nerves was RJ Barrett. The former third pick was inconsistent, and shot a brutal 1 of 10 in the elimination Game 6 in Miami. What hurt most about this L was that a winnable series had been fumbled by the Knicks. Progress had been made overall, but it was clear that some of the young players the Knicks had invested into needed to be replaced. They just didn't fit the system. What system, you ask? The Tom Thibodeau one. By this point, the Knicks were beginning to craft an identity surrounding players that fit into Thibs' system. This meant the team prioritized defensive-minded guys who excelled in intangibles like rebounding, hustling, or just playing hard. The more players that did these things, the better. And whoever didn't work with this philosophy needed to get the boot immediately. The 2023 offseason was of the utmost importance to New York. They had no picks in the draft from the Josh Hart trade, so they were left needing to add players via trade and free agency. They did just that, trading Obi Toppin, the former 8th overall pick back in 2020, to Indiana for 2 meager second-round picks. It was a bold move, and signified that the team was willing to move on and admit when they had made a mistake in the draft. Toppin was a disappointment in New York, and a prime example of a player who simply didn't fit into the game plan constructed by Thibs. Then, they brought in someone who fit perfectly into their plans. They signed Dante DiVincenzo, a two-way guard, on a 4-year, $50 million deal. This was the type of guy that embodied Knicks culture, a gritty shooter, excellent defender, and a winning player. In a symbolic moment of how far this team had come, when DiVincenzo was asked about why he signed with the Knicks, his answer was simple.
But ultimately, it's, I like to win basketball games, and looking at the layout of where I was, potentially going to land, I felt most comfortable coming here.
Think about the significance of this comment for a second. The team that was the complete laughingstock of the NBA just 4 years prior was now attracting free agents because of the excellent winning culture they had built. Incredible. Was the roster improved? Yes. Were they a finished product? Absolutely not. The front office had a few names they were targeting, but decided to keep their offseason condensed to just 2 small moves. The big moves would end up coming a few months later. The 2023-24 Knicks have had by far their most successful season in this new era, and they've become a legitimate playoff threat in the Eastern Conference. To open up the season, their team struggled, playing 500 ball once again. Tom Thibs' system was getting stronger and stronger by the year, but the front office knew that more was needed to take them to that next level. So they went ahead and swung for the fences, making the biggest trade the team had seen in years. In late December 2023, the Knicks made a blockbuster move, trading for Raptors forward OG Anunoby. Anunoby is a fantastic 3-and-D wing, and he transformed New York's defense immediately after joining them. In December, the Knicks had the worst defensive rating in the league, but after he joined, the team shot up to the best defensive rating out of any other team in the month of January. On offense, Anunoby has been ridiculously efficient with the Knicks. He's knocked down his threes at an impressive rate, while showing a phenomenal shot-creating ability the team hasn't seen out of their wings in years. The price to get OG was quite expensive, but worthwhile. RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and a second-round pick were all moved in this deal. Both these two were important rotation players, but OG was a clear upgrade, and it showed on the court. The Knicks opened up 12-2 with Anunoby upon acquiring him, before he suffered an elbow injury that knocked him out for a month and a half. In those 12 wins though, the team looked dominant, with their most impressive win being a near 40-point victory against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. At the trade deadline, they upgraded the roster once more, trading a package centered around Quentin Grimes for Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. For the price of a young player in Grimes and a few seconds, the Knicks got 2 solid bench pieces to bolster their depth even more. When they're healthy, the Knicks have been the hottest team in the league. They may not be favored to win the championship, but if the right pieces fall into place, they could easily make a deep playoff run. In 2019, the Knicks were the worst team in the league. In 2024, they're near the top of the East, and in just half a decade, they have built one of the best team cultures in the NBA. But there's still one thing that followers of the team don't understand. Why isn't this talked about? When I say that the Knicks were a laughingstock in 2019, I don't just say that for hyperbole. I say that because it was certifiably true. The franchise was mocked and ridiculed by the national media for years for its incompetence, yet when they finally became successful, their rise went undocumented. Why? The answer is simple. And no, there's not some secret media agenda against the Knicks. The reality of why their achievements have gone overlooked is because they don't have a superstar. There's no one player like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or an Anthony Edwards to grab all the attention. It's just Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, and the rest of the gang. Who does the media give the most attention to? The teams with the superstars. The Knicks don't have one. Yet. And that brings me to my final point. It won't stay this way, because the Knicks are preparing for something big. Till 2030, the Knicks hold 11 first-round draft picks. Do you think they're holding them just for the funsies? No. They're holding them so that when the next superstar requests out, they'll be ready. And I'm not talking about some B-tier star like Donovan Mitchell. I'm talking about an A-tier star, one of the best players in the league, like a Joel Embiid, for instance. Sixers fans, don't kill me. Part of the reason why the Knicks could never get free agents in the past like Kevin Durant was because their organization was a joke. KD says it perfectly. The team was just not cool to play for.
Clear up something you said for me 5 years ago. Admit the Knicks are cool. Come on, bro.
At that time, they weren't. I mean, the Knicks weren't cool, but they are a cool brand. Like when the Knicks are like on, like right now, when they popping right now. They're playing well. Last few years, they were playing well. But before that, they wasn't playing well.
But you knew the brand was cool.
The brand was cool, but at the time, I'm not looking at the cool brand outside of the game. I was looking at the team. And the team was not cool to play for. The team was not cool to watch.
But now, they've successfully transitioned their team from losers to winners. And it all came from putting in the work. They dug themselves out of the imaginary hole they were trapped in. The Knicks are cool again, and soon enough, they'll be reaping the benefits of their excellent rebuild.